Read this out loud.
Oh, number 19?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any literary translation is a compromise between two goals that cannot be entirely reconciled: faithfulness to the meaning of the text and faithfulness to the original author's style.
All right, so what is that saying so far?
Basically, translation, like between languages, is cannot be done, I guess, perfectly,
I like
because
that. Yeah.
uh, because you're trying, like, it's hard to get faithfulness to the meaning of the text, like get the meaning of the text right, and the author's style in the translation.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I don't think it must not be this question, but there's a question about poetry where it talks about like it's really hard to translate poetry into another language because it loses part of the author's meaning. So that's kind of like where my mind goes, like when I'm envisioning this.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
All right, so continue on.
All right. Thus, even the most skillful translation will be at best a flawed approximation of the original work.
All right, so what is our conclusion here?
Even the most skillful translation will be at best a flawed approximation of the original work.
Excellent. So, and we're saying that it's going to be flawed because it can't be entirely reconciled, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right. So, what kind of question would you say that this is?
Um, what do you mean?
This
And
question.
justify.
Yeah. What kind of question would you say that this is?
Um, maybe like a strengthened
Oh, I
question.
love that. Yeah. No, that's what I call it exactly. I
Okay.
read this as like, which of the following, a lot of people call them principal questions. And I'm like, I don't believe in principal questions. I'm like, all this is saying is like, which of the following premises, if true, most helps to strengthen the reasoning above.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to make a prediction here of what would, if we would add something new in, what would help us prove the fact that the most skillful translation still will be a flawed approximation? Like, what could we say?
Um, maybe that there's no translation that could do both, like get the entire meaning of the text and
We know that there's no translations that can do both, but we need to say what about doing both? We know it can't
yes,
happen.
yeah, that it's impossible.
What about like what's about like we like that we need it, right? Like it's flawed if we don't have both of them. Like right now, that's the assumption
Oh,
we're making,
right.
right?
Okay.
Like we're like it's like sounds such a minor detail, but it's true, right? So we're saying even the most skillful translation will be at best flawed. Well, why does it have to be entirely reconciled to not be flawed? But that's what we're assuming.
Yeah, so I guess it would be, yeah, that, like, if it doesn't entirely, if it's not entirely faithful to the meaning of the text or the author style, then it's flawed.
Yeah, perfect. That's a great prediction. All right, so let's go ahead and go into our answers now and tell me love it, leave it, or hate it, starting with A.
um what are the options? Hate it, I guess, for A.
Which should be entirely faithful to neither. Yeah, bad answer. That's not helping us prove that it's flawed. What about B?
Hate it.
Yeah, because this is saying like if it's flawed, it can't do these things. But we're trying to get to the
Mhm.
idea that it is flawed. Excellent. So let's cross B off. What do you think about C?
Hate it because I feel like weakens, I guess, the
Yeah, that's like the opposite. Like we're saying, will not
yeah.
the most skillful will not necessarily be the most balanced compromise. Like that's
Mhm.
not proving us that at best it's flawed. Like that's not telling us that it's flawed at all, actually. Excellent. What about D?
That one I would say is exactly like what we said is
What you
needed.
said. You predicted that.
Yeah, so I guess that one I would say love it.
All right. And then what about E?
All right, not you.
And what's the difference between D and E? Because I think E's tricky.
Yeah, E is the one. Yeah, E is the one I chose. I got like stuck up on that. I guess that's what I was thinking before, but I guess it already says that in the um
What are we trying to prove?
um that I guess it's impossible to not um it's impossible to be have like a perfect translation.
That's not what we're trying to prove. That's a fact, but we're trying to use that to support what? Like, what is our conclusion?
Oh, so even like the most skilled will be flawed.
Yes, we're
Like
trying
all
to
of them will be
prove
flawed.
that it's flawed. So B is saying not even the most skillful could be faithful. It's like cool,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not telling us that this is flawed at all. Like
Yeah,
we're not
okay.
trying to prove that something is faithful to both of these things. We're trying to prove that if it's not faithful, it's flawed.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay.
So it's more directly related to our conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?